Hey everyone, Carmen here, Managing Digital Editor at MUSE, and I'm here with Rachael Worby, the Artistic Director and Founder of MUSE. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Happy to be here, Carmen.
I'm very excited to talk to you. I actually was just at a music show, was it a week and a half ago-ish?
Yes, June 16th.
Yes, it was amazing. Yeah, Father's Day. And it was so great and so beautiful. So I was very inspired, and I'm super excited to talk to you about the program and the work that you're doing. But I do always start with an inception story. So I'd love if you could sort of tell me a little bit about your journey to music, your long and winding road and as a woman in music, because I mean, you're such a pioneer, and I would just love to, hear more about that.
You know, it's one of those stories that is long and winding, but I think every conductor's story has an interesting and often circuitous path, because unlike becoming a doctor or a lawyer, there's just not a direct route. And certainly when I wanted to become a conductor, there was no direct route for a woman. So the best thing that ever happened to me, and the thing that actually allows me to be the person who's sitting here chatting with you today, is that I was born into a family where music was paramount. My parents started me on piano lessons from the time I was very young. And every day my mother said to me, there are two things you will do every day: brush your teeth and practice the piano. And she wasn't kidding. And this was in spite of the fact that I was not raised in a family that could necessarily support owning a piano or support piano lessons. But again, the paramount importance of making music was something that in which my parents believed deeply. Not just listening to music, but making music. And I think that that was largely driven by my mother, one of the very first women on the planet to have a subscription to Ms. Magazine.
Yes!
Yay, Diana Warby. Because my mother somehow was intuitive about the art of discipline being key to the art of being able to live a productive and successful life. Now, how she came to this is something that's a mystery to me, because at that time she was quite young. She had little or no work experience. She had never been to college, but she had it in her mind that the discipline that I would learn as a result of this daily habit of practicing the piano was something that would come to serve me well throughout the course of my life. And, you know, when you can be one of two kinds of artists. Either you're Yo-Yo Ma and somebody puts a cello between your knees, and then they have to remind you to sleep and brush your teeth and pull you away from it because you feel some calling and you're immediately attached for 3 to 8 hours a day. Or you're somebody who's a more, how would I describe myself? You know, it's not that I'm average, it's just that my response to the world was far more varied than his. And there were many things which attracted me, and therefore many things to distract me. So the idea of practicing the piano for 30 minutes a day in first grade was probably something with which my mother could get away, and on through third grade and fourth grade. But by fifth grade, you know, by sixth grade, when it was now up to 40 minutes and 45 minutes a day, and, you know, including weekends. And this was just something that upon which she insisted. And, you know, by the time I was in junior high, of course, it was a massive fight. And by the time I was in high school, it was like a world war every day, you know, with the wait until your father gets home. in the end, when I graduated from high school, the thing I did better than anything else was play the piano. So, of course, I went away to a music conservatory and majored in piano. And underlying, I guess, that wild relationship that I had with my family, because the entire dynamic of the five of us living in a very tiny house with one bathroom and one small spinet piano, the whole house, I don't know, 700 square feet, it was tiny. But the whole dynamic inside that place was the war between the person who didn't want to practice the piano and the adults who would do it. But underneath all of that was this guy, Leonard Bernstein, who appeared on the scene, and who took me fully into his embrace without ever having met me. His penchant for jazz, for social awareness, for politics, for dance, for theater, for classical music, for being wildly committed to social change and wildly committed to bringing new audiences to music was me. It was there, and he was Jewish, and he was American, and there I was, only he was a man. And when I was a child, people would say to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? The standard question, I would always say Leonard Bernstein. And that always people would laugh, and they're there. And they would offer things like, oh, you mean you want to teach music? You know, Bernstein was a great teacher, probably one of the greatest educators ever to roam this planet. Like Socrates. I mean, he knew how to ask a series of questions that got you to create answers you never knew you had. But I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be him, not him the conductor, but him the curator, him the educator, him the social activist, him the human being with a voracious appetite for John Lennon and Thelonious Monk. And hence I have a voracious appetite for John Lennon and Thelonious Monk. So that he was there, my mother was there, and then my parents with their love for music, because, you know, all things need at least three legs on which to stand. So one was my mother's insistence on the discipline of practicing the piano. Two was Leonard Bernstein himself, and all for which he stood and all that he created. And the third thing was, because of my parents' love of music, they had a record player, which had a long spindle in it. So now my daughter has a record player, but it just has a little nose. But in those years, you could have a record player that was housed in a console, and you could opt for a single 33 1/3 record, or you could opt for a longer spindle that on which you could stack 5 to 10 records, and one at a time. They would mechanically drop down, and the needle would come over, and the record would play. And when that side was over, the needle would retreat to the armrest, and then the second record would drop. So in other words, you were always hearing sort of one side of a record, and then the stack would get turned over. And so the first record might drop, and it could be a Brahms symphony. The second record could drop, and it would be the Weaver singing at Carnegie Hall. The third record could drop, and it would be Odetta. The fourth record could drop, and it would be Thelonious Monk. Then it would be Shostakovich Symphony No. 5, and so on. In other words, even in my earliest ear, I heard this amalgamation of different genres of music, all with equality. Whether it was Glenn Gould playing the Bach-Goldberg variations, followed by Odetta, of whom at that time so few people heard, followed by Nina Simone, it didn't matter. It was all then turn it over, and then would drop down Nina Simone first, then Bach. So not only were they all dropping down together, but the order in which one was hearing them was always disrupted by the flip of the stack. If you ask me anything to define music, I would say, it's the spindle on my parents' phonograph and my deep admiration for the way that Leonard Bernstein went about curating, educating, and living as a musician.
I love that. And I'm thinking too about this idea that your mother was a feminist, and that you've just told me that you were featured in the 1986 issue of MUSE.
Could have been earlier.
We have to dig it up. That's what we're doing right after this. We're going to find it. But I'm curious about the ways in which, like you were saying, there was no path for you, specifically you as a woman in this field. And, we did a lot of work earlier this year with the American Youth Symphony and really explored the idea that, women are approaching parody and instrumentalists who appear on stage, but still so few of the works that are performed are by women, and so few of the people in the connecting pit are women. And so how do you think feminism and your gender shaped the journey you had in your music? Like, sort of, how did that base of coming from that feminist foundation really sort of shape the trajectory?
It gave me a chutzpah that money couldn't buy. But that's all it gave me. Because when I began as a conductor, there were 2 women in the world conducting, or 3. I think one was in Israel and one was in Michigan. It was I didn't know I was a pioneer. I did not know I was a pioneer. But let me say this. When all of my life I said I wanted to be Leonard Bernstein, and inside my head, I guess the tragic flaw in my life is that nobody ever said to me, "Oh, you want to be a conductor? What a great idea. You're a fabulous musician. You have a brilliant mind. You have a great personality. Those are all of the things that one needs to be a successful conductor. Let's look at programs to see where you could study conducting." Never in my entire life did anybody ever say to me, "So you want to be a conductor? What is that what you mean?" Because who would have said it?
Yeah.
Who would have said it? I mean, was there a woman who was a conductor that you saw in some movie somewhere and you said, "Oh, right, in that movie, remember such and such actress played the role of a conductor"? Never. I mean, was there in a novel where you would read that there was a woman who was a conductor? No. So when I finally came to my own conclusion after many years of being a musicologist and studying doctoral work in musicology and being a pianist and being a teacher and teaching at MIT and the New England Conservatory of Music and doing endless things as a musician, I literally woke up one day and said, I had to tell myself, "Oh, the translation of this whole Lenny thing, you want to be a conductor." So maybe that feminist foundation allowed me to say that. Maybe there would be a million other women who would never have that moment. It was a single moment. And then I gestated on it, but not for long. I somehow found out about 10 people around the country who taught conductors. So that was a whole special world that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
I thought if you wanted to learn how to conduct, you had to go ask a famous conductor. But that isn't the case. There are people whose specialty is teaching conductors. And I wrote 10 letters. 9 people never wrote me back. 1 person wrote me back, all in French, and essentially said, you have obviously a thorough background as a pianist, as a musicologist. You would be a worthy candidate as a student, but a woman can't be a conductor. So I would never take you on as a student.
Oh my God.
And yeah, so he taught at Columbia. I was at university. I was at the time living in Boston. And again, though no one has ever asked me about the question in the way in which you asked it about this feminist foundation, I've always said, I have no idea how it happened, but maybe a more reasonable answer is it's the way, because of my mother, and the way she respected herself and the discipline that she imposed on me. I got on a train in Boston and took the train to Penn Station in New York, and then took the subway to 112th Street and Riverside Drive, and showed up at his apartment and presented myself. How I got through the door is a big, long story. And he lectured me in French for about 4 hours about music, asked me a lot of questions in French. And at the end of the conversation, well, finally he asked me something that I didn't understand. And I said, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, mais non, je ne comprends pas." And he said, "You get it?" And I said, "Je ne comprends pas. Lentement. Can you say it more slowly? I don't understand." And he said, "You get it?" And, I had been so both mesmerized and frozen during these 4 hours that I could not hear that he was saying to me in broken English, "You get it?" And finally, and I said, "You speak English?" "But of course." And then he walked me to the door and said, "Au revoir, Mademoiselle Worby. I hope you have a very safe trip back to Boston. A woman cannot be a conductor." And I walked out the door. And I called him and I said, "I'd like to come back." He said, "A woman cannot be a conductor." But I went back and I studied with him for over 2 years. And at the conclusion of every lesson, every week, for at least 4 hours, "Au revoir, Mademoiselle Worby. I hope you have a very safe trip back to Boston. But you must remember one thing. A woman cannot be a conductor." And when he got to know me better, it was, "Au revoir, chérie. I hope you have a very safe trip back to Boston." He believed that deeply. I don't know what I heard when he said it. I don't know if I certainly wasn't dismissive of him. He was one of the greatest teachers of conductors and extremely, extremely famous. I mean, he beat out Boulez and solfège competitions when they were both students in Paris together. He was, quite a substantial musician and highly respected. I don't know what I thought. I never told that story to anybody until I became a conductor. And then when I would tell it, every time I tell it, people laugh the way you did. Because it makes you nervous that somebody would say that. But, in a way, I guess, what else was he supposed to say? The world is your oyster. There are hundreds and thousands of women conducting. You take your pick of jobs and go get it. It wasn't like I was studying to do something that was in his vocabulary. And, after that, the auditions I took were fraught with unbelievable incidents of men walking out, men refusing to tune, men turning their back on me, subs having to be hired, men looking up after I gave an instruction saying, don't tell me what to do, you're not my mother. I mean, things that were devastating. They would devastate me now, and I'm mature and I've shaped my life, but they devastated me then in a much more profound way because I was a natural human being and I was insecure. And we gradually hope as we mature to become less and less insecure. I'm less insecure than I was then, but I'm not secure.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, my knees would knock, I would do rehearsals and I would go off sobbing somewhere, and I felt despised and hated and spat upon and diminished. I don't know wildly why I kept doing it. If there could only be two reasons. One would be that eventually I would get to have music, and the other would have been that I eventually would have had the opportunity to work exclusively as the conductor for Miss Jessie Norman, which I did for 15 years. For those two life-changing events, all of that with which I put up, I guess was the path. I'm not going to say it was worth it, but it was the path.
Well, and in those moments, what did you do to sort of, you know, I mean, we talk about if you can't see it, you can't be it, and we talk about persistence, but so often I think what we don't talk about is how hard it is to be the first or to be one of the very few. And like, what in those moments, how did you sort of gather your strength to keep pushing and not get pushed out?
I was pushed out over and over and over again. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I don't know. The discipline, my mother's refusal to let me quit piano. You know, when I describe a world war, I'm not kidding. And you know, I offered out to play flute. She said, okay, you can do that too. You know, this was practicing piano ruled my life.
Mm-hmm.
When I refused to practice piano, I was not permitted to leave the house, kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I decided I was going to quit piano and I didn't care what my parents leveled at me, I had no social life. I went to school and I came home from school, but I didn't have to practice the piano. And how that turned around is a kind of sweet story, but for another time. But I suppose if you're made to do something every day and you just keep doing it, I mean, it's kind of the same way I get myself to the gym every day. When I first wake up, I say, yeah, I'm not going to go today. And the next thing I know, I'm just putting on the gym clothes and going. It's inculcated.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that came into play. I'm not going to say that in those early years I had family or friends who surrounded me and said, just do it. I'm not sure what they were saying. I wasn't asking, and they weren't too much saying. But then the National Endowment for the Arts and the Exxon Corporation banded together to create a program to train young American conductors. Because the thing was, it was a double hit. Not only was I a woman, I was American. So, and this sounds odd to you now, but there were centuries in the United States of America where all of the conductors were European. That was the biggest deal about Lenny. He was an American. He was an American. He was a kid who went to Harvard. He was, born and raised in Massachusetts. So actually, when Exxon and the NEA made this program to develop young American conductors, I was invited to audition for that program. And it was an audition of, in my memory, I don't know, maybe 40 young conductors, 39 men and me.
Oh, man. Well, and that sort of also makes me think, I was doing my research on you, and I saw that you talk a lot about the arts as a civil right and funding for the arts and how drastically underfunded the arts are in the US. And I'm curious too, so clearly you are, someone who benefited from this sort of public-private partnership, but public funding for the arts.
Absolutely.
A program that was meant to,
Oh, but in my elementary school, in my junior high school, my high school, I went to public school. In my elementary school, there were 3 choruses. In my elementary school, there was a band and an orchestra, and we put on Gilbert and Sullivan operettas every year with some kids playing in the orchestra and some kids singing on stage, all costumed. No, I benefited enormously from the notion that live art was a basic human right. Instruments, and by the time I got to high school, we had special choirs and touring choirs, and the big choir and the jazz choir and the gospel choir and the smaller choir, and orchestras galore, and bands beyond the marching band, jazz bands and dance bands, endless. And then, of course, that notion of Exxon and the NEA banding together to support an organization at the time called Affiliate Artists. And they not only looked for and trained and supported young conductors. So when you were chosen, as I was ultimately, it was that organization that paid the orchestra to have you as a conductor. So no orchestra had to take on an additional burden of an assistant conductor. Your salary was paid through Exxon, the NEA, and Affiliate Artists.
Yeah.
It was an incredible program. But they also funded artists to go into public schools in Mississippi and to go into warehouses and workplaces in Texas and all over the United States. It was a massive, massive program which focused solely on bringing young, talented musicians to make live art in places where people might not necessarily have access.
Mm.
It's a great program.
Yeah, which is so important. I'm also I just want to make sure. It started saying it was trying to reconnect, so I just want to make sure that we pause to see if we can get it to reconnect.
Oh, so it's not working?
I don't know if it broadcasts when it is searching for signal, like if it records it and then, so I just don't want us to lose anything. But I am connected to the Wi-Fi here, so I am not sure why it would not be connected. Mike, do you know if it's currently, if you go to the MUSE Facebook, is it streaming or paused? I feel like it might have paused.
Up to this point, though, it was.
Yeah, because I've been sort of checking on it. I feel like this means there is an intern streaming.
I'm seeing everything you're doing.
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm in that case, we'll keep going, even though it says trying to reconnect.
I apologize.
But I'm also glad because I was so worried that we were losing something.
There's a I'm going to turn it off because I can hear it, but there's a delay.
But it's streaming?
Yeah, definitely. It's
okay.
Just like a 4 or 5 second delay.
Okay, perfect. I'm I'm going to assume then that there was a period at which it was trying to reconnect, and my Facebook has no idea. But, well, in your work, have you sort of seen what public funding in the arts looks like elsewhere? Are there models, maybe models like that one, but models for ways the U.S. could sort of catch up and really increase the way? Because I had the luxury, I guess, of studying music in school, and I loved it, and I felt so connected to, you know, chorus and my drum lessons, because of course I played the drums, the loudest instrument. But yeah, I'm curious as to someone who works so deeply in the arts, like what a difference that funding can make and the differences you've seen it can make.
Well, right now, you know, the National Endowment for the Arts is decimated, and funding for the arts is, in this country, something which is currently left to generous patrons and generous corporations and generous foundations. Perhaps in the coming years, the National Endowment for the Arts will return from whence it came and be a more lively part of the conversation about the arts in this country. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because once you turn a conversation about the arts to a pianissimo, it's very hard to bring it up again.
Yeah.
Because it takes a long time for our species to come to terms with what it feels like to have a life without live art. People don't realize what an absolute necessity it is. And so I don't know that the NEA will anytime soon be part of the vital discussion about the arts in this country.
Well, and sort of talking about live arts, and like that totally brings us to music and the really interesting sort of, you carve out really interesting spaces to perform and to have folks perform. And you, like, we went to the show that was at Caltech, and it was all about, you know, space and had this theme, but it was also in this beautiful open air area, and you feel so connected to your neighbors and this community of people, and you feel like you're actually experiencing music outside of a theater, outside of this very sort of sit in your place, don't move, don't disrupt anyone. It was lively. It was fun.
That's at the core of music. Disrupt.
Yes.
Please disrupt. I mean, in the early stages, when to be disruptive, in the early stages of music, when the phrase disruptive was not overused, we spoke about it. In that way. I'm thrilled by our model, which is to make the entire city our concert hall, and to avoid at all costs actual concert halls, because I find that when we bring people to spaces with which they're not familiar, that experience of enlightenment, awakening, surprise. Oh, I had no idea it was going to be. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, she told me that you were going to put up some video, but oh, I didn't know it would be on a tall building. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, I didn't realize it was going to be built over water. All of that awakeness in you is exactly where I meet you with the music. So you're already uplifted. You're already not the person who went and sat in a hall and waited with the program book. Oh, look who gave. Oh, look at this. Oh, do you want to go to this concert? Is that a dating service? You know, every program book, it's the same.
Yes. Oh, and it's so true. That was our exact experience.
I go through the program book and I say, oh, look, it's an article about me. I have to call Lisa. Look. But, you know, then when the art starts, I've spent my life training as an artist. So for me, the lean in and up to the event, and for me to participate is natural. I know where I am, and I know how to move away from here, move away from the back of my seat, and be a part of the event. But I'm an unusual creature. I'm not interested in me. I mean, all the me's can have Plácido Domingo and Gustavo Dudamel and all of the other great conductors who come through Los Angeles to work with our many orchestras. I'm interested in everybody who's not me. I'm interested in everybody who's anybody but me, for whom that moment of, I had no idea, and now it's Space Oddity, and now it's Fly Me to the Moon, and of course Apollo 11, and now I'm attaching these things, and I didn't know that about John Lennon and David Bowie, and it was great. And did you see all those people? And we were so comfortable, and I didn't need permission to bring my wine in because there was no out. And I didn't need permission to approach the artists because there was no stage, there was no curtain, there was no backstage. I didn't have to wait to see anybody. I saw Rachael before the show. Everyone saw me before the show. It wasn't just you.
Yeah.
Everyone saw me. If you would have followed me around, you would have seen that I said hello to, 300 people. Because I want them, I know you're here, and welcome to my house. I'm so happy you're here. And come on, it's like I've prepared something for you. I'm not a chef. I mean, I never cook. I don't even turn on my stove. But, I've prepared something for you. So I'm welcoming you to my house. This is my private thing that I made. And I'm so passionate about it. And I've worked at every word I'm going to say. And every song has been so carefully curated. And my notion to put things in context has been worked and researched just for you. Just for you. So by the time it happens and you're there, I can't wait. And I think people feel that. So they all come away, something changes. And I think the main thing is there's a subtle or not so subtle acknowledgement of self. Mm. I heard something I didn't know. I felt something I didn't know I was going to feel. I was surprised when there's a lot of singular personal pronoun. And when people have that happen and they say, I didn't know, but now I know. I feel like that's the moment that people go out into the world and say, I can be a better person. I too can make change, a small change. I'll hold a door for somebody. I'll pull out a chair for somebody. I'll thank somebody. I'll say good morning to somebody, whatever it is. And with those minute changes in the world, one by one by one person at a time, I assume that the kind of way that I present live music has an opportunity or as good a chance as any to make a small revolution and change the world.
Oh, I love that. And what kinds of disruptions can we look forward to in Music Summer Session? I know the show we saw was Space.
Yes. So the shows this summer outdoors at the Huntington Museum and Gardens are with full orchestra, and I am actually conducting and curating and putting things in context. And so they're all about movement, about the whole summer is about the idea of what it means, what the word move means. Pictures move, they're moving pictures, but they're really a bunch of stills, and that because our persistence of vision, we see them as moving. And how moved we are by the music that we hear in a moving picture, how moved we are by some pictures that move us. Some are still photographs, they move us, paintings that move us, sculptures that move us, and what it means to be moved. Songs that move us, that bring us to tears. The second event is about trains in honor of Henry Huntington. So it's films which feature trains prominently. like Murder on the Orient Express, North by Northwest, Dr. Zhivago, and on and on and on. And songs about trains like Take the A Train, Orange Blossom Special, and the contemporary dance company Body Traffic is performing their 5-song piece called 1 Million Voices, which is all the songs, 5 songs with the voice of sung by Peggy Lee, 2 of which are about trains. So we're transcribing those songs, we're playing them live, and we have Lee Redpath singing with us. And the third event is about people physically moving. So we have the dancers from the American Ballet Theater coming, and 2 pianists playing 4 pianos. So we'll have 20 fingers and 4 hands moving. And we'll talk about movement like the movement west, people's physical movement and what that means to change location.
Awesome. Well, and I'll drop a link for the tickets in the comments of the video because everyone should go. I had such a great time. And you were right. There was this moment in which we entered the space that we were like, oh, it looks like this. Like it's set up like this. This is over here. We had sort of no idea what we were in for, and then it ended up being, I mean, honestly, beyond our wildest dreams, how sort of wonderful it was and how close we felt with everyone. And
the biggest challenge music faces is that it can't be described. You have to be there to experience it, which is one of the reasons I'm so grateful to you for agreeing to come to the show before this conversation.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because I know that was, an effort for you, but I feel that I know that it would not have been the same conversation because the event informed you, and then you had a platform which you used to pose questions to me, but the questions were not just because these are my rote questions I ask women.
Oh, thank you. I mean, and the pleasure was all mine. I felt so lucky to be there, and we did. Not only did we learn a lot from you in this sort of narration, but also then we learned a lot about each other, right? Like I brought my friend, she was into space, but I had no idea she had such a close relationship with the golden record. And we saw there were tiny golden records on the table. What would you put on a golden record? And she was so taken aback, like moved to tears, and started telling me, I'm going to get a golden record tattoo. This is so special to me. And then that night ended up being like, listen to this Carl Sagan recording. It's like 30 seconds long.
Okay, so she's just like me. I'm obsessed with golden records. I have a shirt that says, bring back more Chuck Berry. Tell her.
Yes.
Because that's the only rock and roll song on the golden record.
Yes. Well, and so interesting too to think that, here you are talking about wanting to be a conductor and a curator and an activist, and that really was what was happening there. We were listening to music from all different time periods with all different themes, but they all came together for this one message. And I loved it, and I appreciated it so much. Thank you for building it, for making it happen, for disrupting. And I mean, thank you for being here today. I'm like, those are all the questions I had for you. I know that we've definitely run a little over our time, but that's okay. But yeah, thank you so much for all you're doing and for being a pioneer without realizing it and blazing that trail for everyone else too.
Hi, Miss Steinem, if you're watching. We're friends.
Ooh, well then maybe she will be
through Miss Norman. So, Miss Norman, if you're watching, Miss Steinem, if you're watching, hi. See you soon in New York.
And thank you so much. And everyone go see Musique if you're in the area. And if not, go connect with Rachael when she's in your area. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. And I'll see you guys soon.
Okay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.